Okay, welcome to the module on Hindu art and architecture before the year 1300. So before discussing the objects and monuments most significant to Hinduism, I'll introduce these basic tenets of the religion. So Hinduism has a lot of the same ideas as Buddhism. They both use the foundational texts of the Vedas and the Upanishads. But unlike Buddhism, Hinduism accepts the authority of the Vedas and then upholds these principles of the caste system. So that way of organizing society um, by merit or wealth or religion or education. But in Hinduism, they're looking for a way out of samsara, just like Buddhism. They're trying to escape that wheel, that constant rebirth, that constant suffering, but they call it moksha when you're escaping samsara. In Buddhism, it's nirvana, and in Hinduism, it's moksha. So, in all indigenous Indian religions, the person who's a devotee, or the Atman as they refer to it, is the same as the divine, or the Brahman. So that means we're all one and the same with the divine found within. Uh, there's an inherent connection to the divine, both in a personal and universal sense. All Hindu art is based on this principle. So the divine is often modeled after the human form. Because of this, Hinduism is often considered a polytheistic religion, meaning that they worship multiple gods, but that's actually the wrong term because there technically is only one God. Like the one true God in Hinduism is called a Brahman, and the Brahman can manifest itself in several forms, including other gods, and that being manifested into these other gods gives the devotee several opportunities to encounter the Brahman. In Hinduism, the most important gods are Shiva, Vishnu, Brahma, not to be confused with Brahman, and then the goddess. So Shiva represents the destructive forces in the universe. He represents the cycle of samsara. It's his role to be the creator and the destroyer of life. He's represented as a linga, which is a phallic form, placed inside of a yoni, which is a vaginal form. So it's these equal yet opposing forces of the universe, creation and destruction. And Shiva's followers are called Shaivites. I know I'm not pronouncing that right, so please look at the transcript. Vishnu is the god who represents the preservation of the universe. His symbolism is often related to the military. A shankha, which is used as a conch, is used to alert troops to war. And then a gada is a mace, and a chakra is the wheel. They're all used as weapons. And Vishnu is the focal point of the two Hindu epics, the Mahabharata and the Ramayana. All Hindus are familiar with these great epics. They were so popular in Hindu culture that there's comic books that retell parts of their stories. Vishnu has a bunch of different forms. He's also shown as a god or as one of his 10 incarnations, which are beings that exist on Earth called avatars. And Vishnu's most popular incarnation is Krishna, who's often depicted in art. Brahma completes the trinity of the gods, and that trinity is called the Trimurti. And the trinity is of Vishnu, Shiva, and Brahma. Brahma is the creator, Vishnu is the preserver, Shiva is the destroyer. They are believed to be one and the same. They're different aspects of a supreme enlightenment or the Brahman. In all of India, there is only one water hole and one temple dedicated to Brahma. So Brahma is honored, but he's never the main god. Big difference between Brahma and Brahman. It's just an N at the end. And then lastly, the goddess. She has many forms in Hinduism. She's generically called Devi or Durga, the warrior goddess. In one popular form, she's depicted with a lion as her vehicle. And the goddess is the Shakti, or the energizing force of the universe that causes action to occur. Therefore, the goddess is often portrayed in an active form. The last thing I'll say before we go into the slides is that there are two main aspects of Hindu society, and that's bhakti and dharma. Dharma is your duty in fulfilling one's social role, and bhakti is one's supreme devotion to God. So while you're looking at these slides, consider, what does devotion mean to you? And when do we use the word devotion? It's not necessarily a rational act, and it involves supreme and unquestioning faith. So devotion and duty in religion is the driving force behind the patronage of Hindu art. So the first example of devotion that we'll look into is this Vishnu temple at Deoghar. It is one of the earliest Hindu temples that still stands today. It was dedicated to the god Vishnu, and it's made out of masonry, and it's uniquely simple. It's a single-cell shrine temple. Unfortunately, the tower of this shrine is in really ruinous condition. When approaching the temple, a devotee would first walk around it in the exterior. And as they walk, they would encounter different reliefs that illustrate the mythology of Vishnu. And the Brahmins, those are the people who were priests at the highest level of the caste. Brahmins were the only ones who were allowed to enter the inner sanctums of the Hindu temples to perform their religious rituals. So the most famous relief on the temple is a depiction of Vishnu reclining on a serpent named Ananta. Due to the belief in samsara, reincarnation of life, including the world, several creation myths exist in Hinduism. This relief depicts Vishnu dreaming of the creation of the world while his wife Lakshmi massages his feet. Brahma, the center of the universe, can be seen at the top, seated on a lotus, which is wrapped around Vishnu's body. And then Brahma then goes on to create the world. This is the site of the caves at Elephanta, which is just outside of Mumbai. It's a major Hindu rock cut site, so we saw a lot of this rock cut architecture and monasteries in the Buddhist module as well. So this site has 3 caves and was probably used by a select community of Brahmins, so only the priestly caste can go in there. The site is probably a royal commission by Krishna Raja I of the Kalachuri dynasty, which took place in about 500 to 600 years Common Era. And because his coins were found on the island and he was a devotee of Shiva, that's why people assume he was the royal commissioner of these caves. So the architectural work could demonstrate Krishnajara Bhakti, or the devotion to Shiva. The main cave at this site, Cave 1, consists of the main shrine with a Shiva Linga, a form that is repeated on many relief sculptures. So remember, the Linga is a phallic form, and it's repeated, as I said, on many relief sculptures that are up against the cave walls. And the reliefs are so prominent in this cave that they overpower the main sanctum. And the main sanctum is the most important part of the Hindu temple. So inside of the main sanctum, the most important image at the temple is called the Sadashiva, and it's on the south wall. The multiple faces of Shiva underscore his multiple aspects. It's outlined above and below. Many have interpreted this image, but in its context, it seems to be plausible that this image represents Shiva's ultimate manifestation and the totality of all he does. The right side has an angry expression called the Aghora, with twisting hair, a mustache, a furrowed brow, and snake earrings. He represents the ferocious side of Shiva, the destructive force that fights time and death and evil. The left profile encompasses Shiva's feminine side, called the Vamadeva, through the face of the goddess Parvati, who represents benign beauty and femininity. And in the middle face is called the Sadyojata, which represents Shiva's most essential and serene form. So it's his most absolute knowledge that's being transmitted through the imagery of this forward-facing emanation of Shiva. So another rock-cut cave is the site in Ellora. It's in Western India, and it's called the Kailashanatha Temple. And this is a huge, like, industrial architectural feat. It houses Hindu, Buddhist, and Jain temples. This was made about 200 years after the site of Elephanta, and this was recognized by the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization as a World Heritage Site. It was a huge undertaking at the size of 196 by 98 feet. It was carved completely out of negative space of the hill. This allowed for these freestanding islands of rock that were chiseled out of the ground from the bottom to the top. So one can find 2 freestanding rock-cut elephants at a column on the floor of the courtyard. And the entire temple complex was commissioned by Krishna I, who reigned from the years 757 to 783 CE. And he was part of the Rashtrakuta dynasty. So Kailashanatha, or Mount Kailasha, is the heavenly home of Shiva in the Himalayas. Krishna was Shiva's avatar. And I want you to think about what we were talking about earlier, how that gods can manifest into these other gods. So Krishna, Shiva's avatar, has brought heaven down to earth, and he names this site Kailashanatha. And then these associates, sorry. So by naming this site Kailashanatha, it then associates this territory with Shiva's home and makes it considered the center of the universe. So building temples like this is part of a king's dharma. It is his duty to provide for his subjects these spiritual and material demonstrations of his devotion. Because of this, a large part of most Hindus' kingdoms' economies were invested into building these temples. The actual building of this temple was a tremendous effort that required tons of resources, such as laborers who had to remove the rock, architects who had to design the temple, artists who had to create the sculptures and the paintings, and then members of the clergy who had to manage the production, and so on. And then once it was finished, all these markets opened up outside of the temples that could take advantage of the foot traffic. And that provided opportunities for commerce. So the temple's construction put money back into the economy. We can think of this similarly to modern day building projects like the building of sports arenas. Thinking about how that kind of, all the resources put in eventually brings in tourism or brings in business. So it's a similar concept. Here's another great picture of Kailashanatha. You can see these elephants built down here, these columns that are built, and then the temples within. So in general, a Hindu temple like Kailashanatha has 4 parts. The Gopura, the gateway, the Mandapa, the porch or hallway for worshippers to gather, the Garbhagriha, the inner shrine, and the Shikara, which is the exterior tower. All 4 sections are preserved at Kailashanatha, but unfortunately only fragments of its paintings remain. The building was so spectacular that, according to legend, its architect stood in front of it in amazement, asking, "Was I indeed the one who built this?" And this site was one of the last hurrahs for rock-cut architecture in Western India, as after that it proved to be way too costly to continue building these. Okay, and we'll stop here and move on to the Chandalas, but I will have you guys, wrap it up on this one and open up the next video.